Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Prescott Heritage Committee, tonight being Thursday, June 8th. I will now call the meeting to order. It is 5:02 p.m. The first item of business on the agenda is the election of the chair. At this point, I will now open up the floor for positions of the chair for the Prescott Heritage Committee. Are there any nominations for this position? Okay, Councillor Lee McConnell, are there any other?
No, I'm not.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'd like to make a nomination. I just assumed.
Dragons.
Yeah, we went through that at the current. I'd like to nominate Joan.
Be happy to second that nomination.
Okay, are there any other nominations?
Oh, I was gonna say I agree with Joan.
Okay.
Well, what if I don't want to do it?
So, yeah, if you don't wish to, that's fine. You can say you don't accept.
Well, I don't know what else is all involved in it.
So you would chair the meetings for the procedure. An annotated agenda would be provided to you. Staff would converse with you to set up meetings. And this appointment will be for the remainder of this year. So if anybody, or if you would like to try it for the year, and then we can see for the remainder of the term for the next 3 years.
If you find it doesn't work out, then just.
Yeah, would that work if she felt that she couldn't do it in the middle of the year? Is she able to?
Yeah, if the committee wishes to change chairs, it would be the same process. Or if it's a conversation that you have with another committee member and they wish to take your place, we could always make a motion to do that.
Nobody else wants it?
If you wanted to try it, Johnny, you don't like it, then I can do it if that makes you more comfortable. If you have a backup plan.
Okay, I'll try.
But if you really enjoy it, you never know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Give it a try.
So, Joan, you accept the nomination?
Sure.
Okay. And there are no further nominations for the position of chair? Okay, calling once, calling twice, calling 3 times? Okay, I will now call the office nominations for the office of chair now closed. And welcome to our new board chair, Joan Rupert Bartley.
Thanks, Lee.
Well, there was method in my benefits because you write for the newspaper.
Okay.
So, given the fact that this is the Heritage Committee, there's a lot of people interested in heritage in Prescott. I thought
That's true.
it would give you something to write about.
That's true. That's good. Yeah.
So through you, Madam Chair, I do have a motion here that reads that Joan Rupert Bartley be elected as chair of the Prescott Heritage Committee for 2023. Can I have a mover? And a second? All in favor? Thank you. Madam Chair, would you like to sit at the front?
Oh, sure. Sure. This is my script.
That is your script. And we're now on item 3.
Number 3. Okay. So approval of the agenda. Okay, so we're under number 3 now. So it's approval of agenda. That the agenda of the Prescott Heritage Committee meeting of June the 8th, 2023 be approved as presented. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Lee McConnell, seconded by Louis.
Yep.
Okay. All in favor? Motion carries. Now we're on to number 4, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none? Okay. Number 5, minutes. Minutes of the meeting held May 26, 2021. Is a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on May 26, 2021. I have a recommendation that the Prescott Heritage Committee minutes dated May 26, 2021 be accepted as presented. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Ruby? Louis? Okay, all in favor? Motion carried. The next one is number 6, agenda items. This is a training presentation. Lindsay Velkamp, Director of Administration Clerk, will speak to the presentation. Is that it?
Through you, Madam Chair. I have just a quick presentation I can provide the committee. So this presentation was provided to the previous term's Heritage Committee, and hopefully it will provide our members with a helpful overview of the roles and responsibilities of this committee. So the Ontario Heritage Act, which is a copy is included in your package, provides municipalities with the authority to establish a Prescott Heritage Committee. The Prescott Heritage Committee was established in 2011 by Bylaw 21/2011, which is also included in your package. The Prescott Heritage Committee is an advisory committee, which means it advises council on matters related to heritage properties within the town. As a Heritage Committee, your role is to advise and assist council on matters relating to the conservation of properties with cultural heritage, value, or interest. There are some changes to properties of interest that we will be discussing in the next presentation, changes with the Ontario Heritage Act, but that will be the next item on the agenda. As well as identifying potential heritage conservation districts, which are geographically defined area within a municipality that is of note for its distinct heritage character. You will also assist council on other heritage matters that are specified by bylaw. Within the Ontario Heritage Act, a municipal heritage committee is established, as previously stated, by bylaw, and is required to, and council is required to consult with the committee before giving its intention to designate a property, on applications to alter designated properties, on applications to demolish or remove heritage properties, on applications to repeal a designation bylaw of a property, on easements or covenants. Some of the additional roles and responsibilities of this committee would be to survey, do an inventory research of properties that might be worthy of protection, involving the community and developing partnerships through programs such as Doors Open events, partnering with tourism marketing agencies in order to engage visitors and residents, and providing education and informing the community to promote heritage conservation through newsletters, descriptive guides, plaques, and other educational materials. The municipal register is outlined in the Ontario Heritage Act, and there are requirements from that act that guide a municipality for what needs to be placed on their website. Currently, the register online includes the address and bylaw number, which establishes the properties of heritage note. Staff are currently working on updating this list to make sure it meets the requirements prior to the July 1st deadline. Those would be for, designated properties. Properties with heritage interest are not designated, and the town of Prescott has 25 listed properties with interest, and these are some of the properties that this committee will have to review before the end of 2020 or the beginning of 2024. The municipal register is accessed on our website by going to prescott.ca, visiting the recreation and culture, and then history and heritage. There you'll find a list of all of the designated properties as well as the interest properties. That's a basic overview of what the role is. Does anyone have any questions? That's it for me. Thank you.
When are we at now? 6.2?
Okay.
Okay. Okay, 6.2 are changes to the Ontario Heritage Act. The presentation on the changes to the Ontario Heritage Act, Lindsay Velkamp will speak to the presentation.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. This presentation is going to provide a brief overview of the changes to the Ontario Heritage Act and specifically how that's going to affect this committee. The previous presentation provided a brief overview of the Ontario Heritage Act and the powers provided to councils to designate properties of cultural heritage and value or interest. The importance of designating heritage properties is to keep a collective memory for residents of our town. Bill 23, More Homes Built Fast Act 2022, is based on the recommendations from the Housing Affordability Task Force report, along with other provincial priorities relating to housing. The purpose of the act is to provide space for new housing developments. As mentioned in the previous presentation, Bill 23 has specific impacts on the Ontario Heritage Act and in turn on this committee. This slide shows some of the specific areas of the Ontario Heritage Act that are affected by the changes. The main focus of this committee will be the first point here under section 25.2, which are the heritage standards and guidelines. This section of the Act provides the standards and guidelines for identification, protection, maintenance, and use of disposing of property. Additional areas of changes to the Act include section 27, as mentioned previously, changing the requirements of what information has to be included on the municipal register and made accessible by the public on the municipal website. So currently it is the designating bylaw as well as the address, but the changes to the Act require legal address, brief description of the property, as well as owner's name. The slide shows additional changes to the Ontario Heritage Act. So as you can see in the past 3 slides, there are quite a few areas that are changing, but the main focus for this committee is going to be that section 25 with the heritage interest properties. So areas for focus for the committee is potentially doing an analysis of current properties listed as having heritage interest and value. The town of Prescott has 25 properties in total of heritage interest and value. And this committee can consider the prescribed criteria, which are outlined in OREG 0936, as to what can make a property, what qualifies a property to be designated. So this committee will be reviewing those properties to make sure that they meet those criteria and provide recommendations to council as to which properties should potentially move on for designation or should be removed from this list. A point of note is that these properties can only remain on this listing of interest for 2 years. And then if the committee decides to remove one of those properties from the list, it cannot be re-added for 5 years. So again, to kind of further on that, Prescott Heritage Committee will make recommendations to council and council would then make the final decision. So which properties should be removed from the heritage interest or value listing and which properties should be considered for that designation. And all this needs to be completed prior to December 31st, 2024. So I misspoke earlier when I said beginning of 2024, we have a whole extra year, so that'll be. This is the current listing of the properties that have heritage interest and value in town. There is a listing of these properties in your package as well as the designated properties. So these ones are the ones with interest.
All these properties, I presume they've been designated or listed over various years, probably long before you were here. But the question I have is, as a committee here, if we think a property is of heritage interest and wanted to designate, do we have to have the agreement of the owner? Can we ever?
So through you, Madam Chair, I'd have to look back at what the requirements would have been. So most of these interest properties, I believe, were designated in 2014, all 25 of them, I think over 3 separate resolutions. But now I know the guidelines through the changes in the Act, there is a notice period where you do have to provide that notice to the owners. And I think there is an opportunity for them to appeal the designation, but I would have to look into that further. Any other questions?
Is there any advantage to being a designated as opposed to just an interest?
So I think the advantages would be for grants and I think we've discussed that it's a balance as to how not to make it too onerous on the owner to have to maintain the property, because whatever is designated on the property, obviously there's a process that if they want to make changes, has to come to this committee.
Right.
Other than benefits, maybe our CAO could speak to that.
So I think there's a balance from a town perspective or a collective perspective. There's definitely benefits of maintaining that heritage, maintaining the, what makes those features of that property special.
Right.
And that's why we designate particular properties. For the homeowner, we do have community improvement plan funds available for heritage properties, so they're able to access that. But then it also sometimes limits them in things that they can change to their property, and they have to end up going through this committee when they do want to make those changes. So there's advantages on both sides.
On both sides, yeah.
But certainly it's more of a longer term maintaining that collective history for the town.
Okay, thanks.
Demolition is also a problem for
Yeah,
the homeowner. If they wanted to get a demolition certificate, it would be more difficult on a heritage building.
is that like the one across from, Brent Todd? Yeah,
Your house could be designated,
it's only over 60 years old.
doesn't matter, it was my grade 2 teacher that used to live.
Well, then it must be old.
That's the historic note right there.
And if I may, I think that's a great opportunity when we get into looking at listed properties and designated properties. What are the criteria that we use?
Right,
And, get a great opportunity because the province wants us to go through that listed and say, should they be listed and why?
Right.
Or should they be designated and why? And so I think over the next several months or over the next year and a half, we'll have a great opportunity to really delve into that and look at that criteria and measure each property and say, yes, this is why we want to preserve it. Or while the story might be special, that obviously Councilor McConnell's teacher must have moved later in life to the, because I wasn't sure that the horse and buggy. But certainly, I think that will be an excellent, and it gives something for the committee to look and understand and really evaluate those properties that we have on that list.
right. But there's no charge or anything, like if it's a designated, the homeowner doesn't have to pay a charge or anything, no?
We have, obviously people wandering around Prescott, we get a tremendous number of old houses here, stone houses, brick houses, one across the street. And your house, for example, is pretty close to 3 others within a block there with.
Yeah, it's the same design. So James, the builder, like they named the street after, they all repeat. I think there's 7 houses in town that are identical. And in my case, it's built in 1867. Now, if you were to ask me, Louis, do you want to have a heritage? I would say no, because I might do various things inside and I might do various, seeing the way and balances the financial, the will and power to want to, and then the third is to maintain it. And are you going to stay there for a long period of time, right?
The thing is, you mentioned there's 7 houses that are virtually identical, and you can walk down our block and there's about 3 right there with various additions on them. And if there was one of those houses, even though they all look the same, that had been lived in or built or purchased by some very noteworthy Prescottonian of the past, then that might be a reason to designate it, not so much the house itself, but who lived there. Right?
So through you, Madam Chair, there are some, well, I shouldn't say some, there are 9 specific reasons to designate outlined in OREG 906. And 2 of them need to be met in order to designate. Some of them are historical value because it yields information that contributes to the understanding of the community or culture. So if there happened to be an event, or if the work demonstrates the ideas of an architect or an artist, or contextual value because it's important in defining, maintaining, or supporting the character of an area. So I think there are some criteria there that you could fit something like that in.
The thing we're lucky too is that we have 2 heritage books based on Prescott homes. That could, like that, we could probably look up any of these houses and go back to those 2 books and see if they, there's a story behind them. Because the last edition was pretty good. It outlined, I think, most of the houses, I would say.
So staff see the next steps for this committee as scheduling quarterly meetings to review properties of heritage interest and value spread over the next 18 months. Since there are 25 properties, we thought if we could bring it into bite-sized chunks for you guys to review and not feel overwhelmed dealing with all 25 in one sitting. And then staff will be working on the creation of a checklist based on those 9 criteria that I just referenced. So it would be easy to pick and choose and review what the attributes to each property are and how that fits. I'm hoping for the next meeting to have the first 5 picked out and then also include the resolution, an explanation as to what about these properties sparked the interest to place them on this this register of heritage interest and value in the first place, so the committee could review those and use that in their decision making.
Just a question, Lindsay. Do we have to have full cooperation of the owner?
For designation?
Yes.
Through you, Madam Chair, I do need to take another look at that regulation. There is a notice period, and I think there is an opportunity for them to appeal. I think the appeal process goes not through us. I believe it's to another level. But I think my understanding of these changes to the act are to kind of make some changes to push things through for housing. So
The only question, the reason I say that is because we've had a lot of people leave town, or we've had a lot of people come into town. So let's just say if 3 years ago, somebody wanted to, we're back in 2014, they've moved on, somebody's lived it, they don't even know that their house is on their designation.
Yeah.
Are they obligated, right? And that's where I would think, do private property rights come into play, or do we just say, okay, you're not interested, we'll move on?
well, through you again, Madam Chair, I believe the committee could always take the recommendation from the homeowner as well too. So if that's something that could play into part for the recommendation for designation, that's something that could be considered as well.
Sounds good, ma'am.
Suggestion? Yeah, how many are we gonna do at each meeting, did you say?
So I think in the first couple meetings, we might just do a couple, like 2 or 3. And then as we get going, we'll bump it up to 5 or 6.
Okay, so would there be a value prior to each meeting to notify the property owner that we are going to discuss their property at this meeting?
Yeah, I think at our next meeting, what we can do is go through, create the checklist as well as kind of that notification process and who you would like at the meeting and, you know, the interested parties, that sort of thing. And then we can definitely set that up as we go forward. And then after we do it a couple of times, we'll kind of go back to the checklist and say, everything makes sense, does notification make sense? And that way it can be, and I think having it as an inclusive process is where they're participating as well is a good idea.
So I'm presuming here, just from what we've got, that we don't have pictures of each of these properties, or do we?
So through you, Madam Chair, again, another project that we wanted to take pictures. So there is a visual for everyone, but at this point, we don't. The designating bylaws for the designated houses, properties do have photos. So that binder is in my office if anyone wants to see it. I don't believe we have that for the interest properties.
So I think in preparation for each meeting, we'll, you know, either take pictures or pull the street view and things like that, and then have a better understanding of what was the reasoning for putting it on the list, and then kind of going through the checklist and saying, does it rise to a consideration for designation, or is it something that we, want to make note of, but perhaps it's not significant enough to either be on the listed or the designated. So, and I think with that, at least we have a list, or not a list, but a bit of a database that we can say going forward, as we see development in those areas and on those properties, we can add that to our building permit review and those types of things.
Louis made a good point that the way people have been coming and going the last couple of years, that somebody that may have asked to have their house designated or noticed or whatever the term is may not be here anymore. So, I think it's a very good idea that as we discuss each one of these, that we have the people either here or notify them.
And I think when I kind of take a step back and look at the legislation, what they were trying to do is not create this perpetual list of interest properties. It's either, if you're on the listed, on that list of interest, then the committee should be seriously considering, does it go to designation or not? As opposed to, I think our list was in 2014, hasn't moved one way or the other since. And so I think that's really what the intention is that if you're on the list, you have 2 years for the committee to make a decision and a recommendation to council. And then you don't get to touch it again for another 5 years. So it kind of creates that list of being a little bit more dynamic and ongoing, and maybe allows us to deal with the ones that are on there now, and then look at why would we, what are the other ones that we should take a look at and evaluate and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's a good way to make this an active committee as opposed to just doing with things when development or redevelopment happens.
I guess that's it. So if you guys have any more questions.
No? Okay. So we on to new business? So rest?
Oh, no, sorry, 6.3. I got off again.
Okay. Okay, the Prescott Heritage Committee amending bylaws. This report is for information only and is from the Director of Administration, Clerk Lindsay Belkamp. Ms. Belkamp would like to speak to this report.
Chair?
Yeah.
I know. You're all going to be sick of hearing from me. So this staff report comes up during the last term. There was interest expressed from some members of the committee to review the current bylaws to establish the Prescott Heritage Committee. I believe we're one of the proponents for that. Do you recall? No? Okay. So there were some changes suggested regarding the bylaw, which include section 2. That members shall be appointed by resolution by council for the term of council. Currently, the bylaw reads every year, and to match up what our other committees and boards do by appointing someone for the term, it means that every year you don't have to go through that process. That being said, we didn't want to put someone in place for the entire term without having that amendment go through for the bylaws, which is why we put the chair term just for this year. The other change was to section 3, that the Prescott Heritage Committee at its first meeting shall elect the chairman from its membership. Sorry, that kind of goes, I kind of explained that a little too early. So that is what's, instead of doing an election of the chair at the first meeting of every year, it would be for the entire term of council for the 4 years. So the thought would be for January 2023 or whenever the first meeting of this committee is for next year, the chair would be appointed for the remainder of the term, if that makes sense. Okay. And then the last section, section 5F, is the current bylaw stated that the board shall meet, I think it was quarterly, and then staff are suggesting that the change be that the committee shall meet as required. So then that way you meet if any applications come in, or in this situation as we need to review properties. And then it gives a little more flexibility for the committee. I included with the report is the current bylaw as well as the drafted amending bylaw. If the committee likes what they see, what we'll end up doing is bring a report to council to see, to recommend to council to make those changes to that bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is new business. Does anybody have any new business they'd like to bring up?
You know, approve those changes or?
Through you, Madam Chair. We didn't put a recommendation. If the committee has any feedback that they'd want to provide to staff, if there are any other changes or if there's changes you don't approve, make sure to read those, bring those back to council.
What's gotta go through council?
To approve the bylaw.
Oh, okay.
But through you, Madam Chair, if we had feedback from the committee, I imagine that would be a question of council if the changes went through the committee for review first.
So there's a couple ways we can handle it. Either you can kind of say, yeah, we agree to it, or we can work with it at our next meeting. And, you have a little bit of time to consider and contemplate. And if there's anything else that you want to work into it, we can add that to the next agenda. Just confirm that, that those terms of reference work for you, and then we can bring it forward to council.
Is 5 the correct number, Lindsay?
Through you, Madam Chair, the act doesn't stipulate how many members. I'm trying to remember if it's through our bylaw or through the act. I can double check. Matthew, do you recall?
I don't recall, but I think what we were thinking is you can't have any fewer than 5. But if you start going 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, then it can be a little bit of unwieldy, just to try and generate discussion and that sort of thing. So I think that's why we were thinking 5. We don't have a huge, like there's some municipalities that have hundreds of properties and heritage properties, whereas I think we have 33 designated and 25 listed. So yeah, that's where we kind of felt that 5 was an appropriate number.
I'm sorry, through you, Madam Chair. So the act does say no fewer than 5.
Oh. So should we be setting a time to have our next meeting?
Also through you, staff thought what we could do was email out to the committee and see what availability was like.
Okay.
One of the questions to the committee would be, would you like to meet over the summer months, or would you prefer to wait till after the summer was done? We weren't quite sure with holidays and if people are traveling, if it makes it difficult to meet through the months of July and August.
Well, I don't have any problem meeting in the summer as long as it's between Canada Day in the middle of August. I'm available then.
And also just to note, we are able to Zoom in too. So if you do happen to be somewhere and you'd like to call in, that's an option. So you don't actually have to physically be here.
So we'll kind of seek for a meeting date sometime in the summer, towards mid to later July, if that works. And then we can try and figure out what the criteria and the checklist look like. And then perhaps the next one in September, where we can hit the ground running for our first couple of ones that we can apply to the checklist.
I'll volunteer to take pictures of this list of houses. I'll do it with iPad, as it was called.
Okay. Appreciate not using the stone and tablet, so.
Very funny.
Okay, so number 8's media questions. There's no media here. And I'm the media.
That's right. We always have media present.
I have no questions. Okay, number 9's adjournment. I have a recommendation that the Prescott Heritage Committee meeting be adjourned. The time is 5:36. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Ray and Ruby? All in favor? Adjourned. Thank you.